Welcome everyone to today's Edison Electric Institute webinar on Building Regional Markets, Lessons from GCCIA. My name is Vanessa Ferrero and I'm a manager for international programs at EEI. Today's webinar features Ahmed Ali Al-Ibrahim, who will share how GCCIA established a regional market across 6 countries in the Middle East. Before we get started, I want to go over some housekeeping items and remind everyone of EEI's compliance with antitrust laws. As you all know, EEI and its members are committed to full compliance with all laws and regulations and to maintaining the highest ethical standards in the way we do business. This commitment includes strict compliance with federal and state antitrust laws. Throughout this session, we encourage you to join in the conversation by submitting questions using the chat feature. The webinar presentation and recording will be made available to all attendees after today's session. Now I will turn this over to Lawrence Jones, Vice President for International Programs at Edison Electric Institute, who will moderate today's session.
Thank you, Vanessa. Good morning, everyone. And again, welcome to this webinar that's going to focus on the building of regional electricity markets. We're delighted this morning that we'll be having this conversation with Ahmed Al-Ibrahim. Ahmed is the CEO of the Gulf Coordinating Council Interconnection Authority, excuse me. And he'll be giving us his perspectives on what has been happening in the region as it relates to electricity markets. I should also say that in his role as a member of EEI, meaning GCCIA, Ahmed is also the chairman of our Regional Advisory Committee for the Middle East and Africa. Before Ahmed begins his presentation, I would like today for us to make an announcement. If Vanessa can bring up the slide, we would like to announce today that EEI and GCCIA have renewed our partnership, and today we are announcing the signing of a new or an updated version of our strategic partnership agreement, and we're delighted that we'll be working with GCCIA in this arena. And so Ahmed, I just want to say thank you again for this partnership, and maybe you want to say a few words before we get into your presentation about this very important milestone in the relationship between GCCIA and EEI.
Thank you, Lawrence, and thank you everybody for being here. I think this comes as a continuation of our cooperation with EEI, which started around 3 years ago. And I think this emphasizes the need for our international network so that we can start exchanging experiences, exchanging views, and finding some knowledge sharing opportunities, especially in the current energy transition area where we need to have more focus on policies that lead to more resilience. How do we respond to different things like what we had, the COVID-19? How do we maintain business continuity? Things about regional transmission and generation planning. I think there's lots of value in terms of exchanging this kind of information and learning from each other so that we can have more reliable and resilient grids. So thank you, Lawrence and EEI, for this opportunity, and we are looking forward to this collaboration. And this first webinar comes as part of this kind of collaboration. So thank you, Lawrence, for this.
Thank you so much, Ahmed. And I should say, as we now move into the topic of the day, which is the creation of electricity markets, we know that markets are essential, whatever form they take, to make sure that we can accomplish some of the goals as it relates to achieving global energy transition. We're delighted today to see so many people on the call, and so hopefully as Ahmed does his presentation, there will be plenty of time for feedback and questions. I note some folks from Europe who are deeply involved in the creation of markets in their own territory, as well as people from other parts of the world. Ahmed, before you begin, I would also like to mention, you used the word cooperation. I would say that nowhere has cooperation been so interesting as it is in your region with the creation of these markets involving 6 countries. And so what has fascinated me about your work over the years, and I look forward to hearing your remarks today, is there's a lot, I believe, the rest of the world can learn from having the ability to bring together 6 countries and create a regional market and have a utility or have an organization that's run across those 6 countries. So you have a lot of lessons you can share with us. And so Over to you. We look forward to your presentation, and we'll take some Q&A afterwards. So please, Ahmed, go ahead.
Thank you. Let me start my presentation. I think, as you said, Lawrence, this experience has been so unique because usually markets have like an organic growth, while here we had 6 countries who came together with the political will to build an electricity highway between them, a regional interconnection grid, which will be the basics for exchanging capacities, for exchanging reserve power and support during emergencies. But most importantly is the basis and the foundation for building the regional power market in the GCC. And that experience is quite unique, you know. And today, you know, there's always a shortage of time. I mean, if we want to talk about the lessons, we have to take a few sessions. But today, I'd like to maybe just mention a few things, you know, about the lessons that we learned, the journey that we went through, and maybe hear from others their perspectives and feedback, and to have a little bit of discussions and feedback about our experiences. Now, first of all, the GCC Interconnection Authority is about 19 years old. We were established in 2001. We managed during this time to build and operate an interconnection, a super grid that interconnects the 6 GCC countries' national grids, which provides a new level of energy security. We have in this kind of setup coordinated operation where we have an interconnection control center coordinating the operation between the 6 countries, in addition to operating our own grid that we own and operate. Also, it's a platform for sharing reserves and capacities, which results in millions of dollars of savings every year. More than $200 million are being saved every year by the operation of this interconnector. It allows for energy exchange during emergency, which supports the resilience and the security of the GCC power systems. And usually this kind of energy is exchange in kind, but also allows for a regional exchange and trade of energy with platforms that allow market operations and power trading through different means that we will maybe mention later on. We just revised our vision for 2025, which is basically to become a global hub in grid interconnection. I think we believe that the interconnector is a very important platform which allows for building this dynamic electricity market, but we need to do it with more emphasis on innovation, on resiliency, and on sustainability. And we are talking about creating a regional market in the GCC and beyond. So that's how we foresee our vision for the next 5 years. The GCC interconnector, we see it as an enabler for the new energy era, where we have the energy transition. First of all, we have coordinated and optimized grid operation at real time, and also in the planning domain. And we'll talk a little bit about it later on. The interconnector is an enabler and a facilitator of renewable energy integration in the GCC, where I think you know that we in the GCC are having lots of big, renewable projects, multi-hundred megawatts of PVs coming on, and the sizes are increasing, reaching maybe 2 gigawatts in one plant. We also working on expanding the grid beyond the GCC and reaching opportunities in other regions so that we can exchange this kind of excess energy. And to do that, it's very important to develop the power market in the GCC and maybe connect it to the other regions' power markets. In terms of emergency support, from day one, since 2009, the GCC interconnector has been successful in supporting a new level of resiliency in the GCC countries. Big disturbances that used to cause blackouts in the past are, are not causing any kind of shortages so far. Since the beginning, since 2009, more than 10 years ago, we managed to have different levels of support, as you can see it here. And all these kind of big disturbances that we managed to support, we managed to prevent total or partial blackouts in all the member states. And the interconnector has been there for all the member states to provide them with the support that they expect and need. In addition to that, there are lots of savings that this interconnector provides. And these savings span through many domains. The biggest one is usually the installed capacity savings values, where it is basically the savings in investment costs in building new generation capacities, where you can utilize the interconnector for providing these kind of capacities. The other one is savings in fuel and operation and maintenance savings. It's basically the optimized operation and using the optimal power resources within the GCC countries. Also, sharing of spinning reserves, results in savings. The avoidance of loss of load also have a value which we calculate. Trading on economical basis, it's only 31 million last year, but the potential is much bigger than that, and we are in our plan trying to develop it more and more. And this is where we really will hit the jackpot in terms of savings over the interconnector. Of course, we also target, decreasing CO2 transmission, and we utilize also the interconnector for providing fiber optic infrastructure for the telecom companies, which also gives some optimized utilization of investment. Let me take you through the historical journey that we had. The GCC interconnector started very early in the 80s with early studies. The last study was done in 1990, where it proved the techno-economic feasibility of the project. However, things only started moving in 2001 by the establishment of the GCCIA as a joint stock company. By 2004, we updated the techno-economic study, and we have floated the project tenders to start building the project, or phase one of the project. The contracts were awarded in 2005, and by 2009, the first phase of the interconnector connecting the four first phase countries were completed. And the first time in the summer of 2009, the countries of Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia were interconnected for the first time. By 2011, we also managed to complete the other requirement for connecting UAE, Abu Dhabi, and Oman, and both countries were electrically connected. Thus, by 2011, the 6 countries of the GCC were connected together as one grid, as one GCC grid. Now, I'll be talking about some experiences that we had during the establishment phase to start with. The GCC interconnector has been the first joint infrastructure project of its kind. I think that it's a new experience. So, we had to go through a little bit of a new land to see what needs to be done, the strategies that need to be set up. So the feasibility studies were done in, very early in the 80s, and until 1999, it was basically studies and meetings of committees and things like that, but nothing has happened. However, I think the turning point was in 1999, where during in the summit meeting of the GCC leaders, it has been decided to go ahead with the GCC interconnector, which showed the political will to do this project. And I think this is a very important aspect of the success of the GCC interconnector, is having political will of the countries to do it. Because if you have political will, then you can find solutions for all other issues. So there was a decision to do it. And there was a decision, an important decision, that we had to do it through, a specific and independent authority that should be having the responsibilities of building this interconnector, operating and maintaining it, and also developing a power market. So this is when, in 2001, the GCCIA was established as a joint stock company, and it was with shareholding from the 6 Gulf states, to give it strength, because the GCC countries have decided that the headquarters of the GCC would be in the eastern province of Saudi Arabia because of geographical center. So the Articles of Association and bylaws of the GCC interconnector was approved by a Saudi royal decree in July 29, 2001, because it was established under the Saudi commercial laws, and that gave some specific privileges to the GCCIA to allow it to function as a regional interconnector rather than being some kind of a local one. So we have, although we exist in Saudi Arabia, but we have a regional nature, and the royal decree that was given by the king has given us this kind of exception to allow us to function as a regional authority within Saudi Arabia and the other countries. One starting thing is, how do we finance this project? The GCCIA was established in 2001. It's a new entity. It doesn't have any kind of financial background. It doesn't have any kind of assets. So it was decided that the financing of the project would be done 100% by equity. And that's also a big decision, because for $1.4 billion, this kind of money would have to be put by all the 6 countries, and all the 6 countries have agreed to contribute their shares in the equity and the shareholding of the GCCIA. And it was also decided that the shareholding and the contribution in the capital of GCCIA would be proportional to the benefits that the countries will be gaining according to the techno-economic study. So that was also a very big agreement to agree on this principle, because this is very important to have this kind of agreement so that we can avail the required financing. And the financing during that time has been put ahead of time. So we had all the finance and the cash, that we needed to start the project, and finance it all through the phase 1 and the other phases of the project. Another important aspect is developing the proper agreements and the proper legal framework. And I think this is one of the most important factors in the success of this project also, having a proper legal framework and a proper organizational setup. And at the top of that, it was the general agreement. The general agreement was like the international treaty that was signed between the 6 countries of the Gulf by the leaders, but they delegated the ministers of electricity or the ministers of energy to sign on their behalf. So this is an international treaty, setting all the roles and responsibilities of the 6 countries, establishing the GCCIA, setting all the rules, setting all the different entities that will be required to operate this business of interconnection, and to regulate it, and to do proper coordination in terms of operation and planning. And this is how it was set up in terms of establishing GCCIA as a company that has a board of directors with representatives from each of the member states. So GCCIA has a board with equal representation in the board. There are 2 members from each of the 6 countries, and the rotation of chairmanship is every 3 years in terms of alphabetical order. So everybody takes their turn, and there are equal representation in the board of directors. Also, one of the important things established was the Advisory and Regulatory Committee, which is basically the regulator of the interconnection business. I'll talk a little bit about it a little while. And also, there are 2 joint committees, that report to the board of directors and give recommendations about planning aspects and operation aspects of the interconnector. And these 2 joint committees have representative from the GCC power utilities or companies, which completes the cycle and ensures that all the utilities in the GCC are represented properly in the planning aspect and the operation aspect of this project. In addition to the general agreement, which is a basic treaty between the 6 countries, there was the commercial agreement, which is the power exchange and trading agreement. And this sets up the framework for exchanging and trading electricity between the member states. It also has a transmission and metering code that enables the proper application of rules of the transmission and metering. And I think this overall structure has addressed all the important aspects of a project, or in terms of operating and running this project and operating this kind of interconnection and regulating the all the operations, whether it's technical operations or commercial operations that relate to the market. And this is one of the key aspects that allowed the success of this project. Now, let's go a little bit more about how we address the regulatory requirements. The establishment of the Advisory and Regulatory Committee, in short, we call it ARC. It is a committee that's composed of the national regulators representative. This committee, operates at the regional level. It does not have any kind of national jurisdiction that conflicts with any kind of national regulator. So it only talks about the regional aspect of this interconnection. It carries out 2 roles. It carries out regulatory responsibilities for the regional interconnection, such things like approval of tariffs. So we propose tariffs and they study it and review it and they approve it. Methodologies for different, whether it's financial methodologies that relate to budgeting, to cost allocations, to all kind of methodologies. We take it up to the regulator and they review it and approve it. They monitor also interconnector performance through specific key performance indicators. They look into expansion proposals and they approve or give us feedback on the proposals so that they become suitable. So all these kind of activities. It also carries out advisory role reporting to the GCC Ministerial Committee. And this is how we handle the regulatory requirement and address the regulatory requirements. In terms of operational issues, we do it through the Operations Committee. It's composed of GCC Power Utilities Operations Directors or representatives. It supervises the regional GCC interconnected grid operations. It addresses and coordinates all the operational issues and to ensure a secure, reliable, and stable operation. And to do that, it has to propose operation procedures and set up operational protocols. In addition to that, we have the Planning Committee, which works at the medium and long-term planning domain. It's also composed of GCC Power Utilities planning directors or representatives. It addresses and coordinates all planning issues to ensure that we reach the required level of reliability of the interconnector. Things like install capacity targets, they usually do studies on that, and they set targets, and they monitor the compliance of the member states to these targets. And they're in this case in charge of the interconnected grid planning and expansion studies. In terms of the power trading and developing the market, we started very early on in 2010, and we tried to promote the power trade between member states. And the first thing we did is to conduct a study about what are the key issues or obstacles that needs to be addressed so that we can have a dynamic and an efficient or an effective power market between the GCC member states. So we developed this white paper, and in this paper we identified major obstacles, and we recommended initiatives to promote these, to promote the power trading development. We presented this to the GCC ministers and key decision makers in the GCC, and we have set up some kind of an action plan to implement the initiatives which we discussed with all the GCC member states. And some of the challenges that we saw that time, and that we needed to work on was things like, absence of visibility and awareness of electricity costs between the member states, and how they can achieve proper costing and through power trading. We had also an issue about energy price distortion due to different levels of subsidies in the GCC countries. There was also differences in national energy policies, which has affected the participation of member states in the power trading. Also, local regulations, it was different from countries to countries. You had countries who have regulators, you had countries who didn't have regulators. There were different rules and regulations with regard to cross-border power trading that had to be reviewed and maybe updated or developed so that it will allow for cross-border trading. There were differences in national power sector structures, where you have vertically integrated entities in some of the countries, while you have fully unbundled structures in other countries, and some of them are working on their own national markets. But from our perspective, also there was only 6 market participants, which is basically the 6 member states, which we consider is a very low number of market participants. So these were some of the obstacles. And from our white paper, we try to address these kind of obstacles by some initiatives such as GCCIA taking an active market facilitator role to try to promote opportunities of trading and to develop a market. Activation of trading in kind, where the countries can trade in kind instead of trading in cash, and it has also proved to be an effective tool. Introducing additional market players, we still don't have any development of that, because that needs really a change in the national regulation of each of the countries. Addressing visibility of energy costs for the GCC power systems, and we have some initiatives in terms of initiating a pilot project for energy pricing between the member states, which will give this kind of visibility in terms of these kind of exercises that we will do with the member states, and that will allow us to address the energy pricing also. We also push towards introducing the interconnected capacity as in the member states when they do their expansion. So they have to have it in their plans. They account for the interconnector capacity so that they can reduce the kind of generation capacities that they need to add to their system. Aligning of policies, and also promoting integration of new and renewable energy resources, which naturally need more interconnections to allow for the optimal utilization of renewables. This is part of the activities that we have done. We have done several forums. I think the last forum also, Lawrence was there, and so the kind of interest that we had. We had several, workshops and discussions and seminars with different parties, and different level of decision makers. And all that we're trying to promote the power trading. It's not very easy, especially in our GCC region. But I think things are moving towards more utilization of the interconnector for power trading. So let's see what happened. Since 2009, you can see that things have been developing more and more. And in the last few years, you can see that we have more and more volumes of trading happening. But the interesting part is that the last 2 years we had also trading, because trading in the past happened only during the summer, where there is in our region a need for high demands and high energy because of air conditioning during the summertime. But the interesting part is that we also are having in the last 2 years some power trading during the winter time. And this is a good sign that we can have opportunities for trading during the whole season. And that's a good development from our part. Some of the trading enablers, we try to reduce or waive transmission charges in order to encourage member states. I think we started with a little bit high transmission charges, which is basically for the capacity fixed at $5 for each megawatt each hour since 2010. And when we realized the need to give some kind of incentives to the member states, we started waiving these transmission charges, and we've seen that it had an effect on the trading, and we started seeing higher and higher volumes of trading. So far, we have been successful in increasing this kind of volumes, and hopefully in the future, I think we will be stabilizing these kind of transmission tariffs at a reasonable level, maybe at 0.5 or $1. Nowadays, this is how we have in terms of the structure of our electricity market. We managed to have a capacity market that was something basic that was in the power exchange and trading agreement. It allows the members to procure installed capacity through the interconnector to achieve their installed capacity obligations. So if they don't have the obligation that they have to avail that year, they can buy it over the interconnector. We are also, having the members required to maintain their share of spinning reserve in the GCC on the GCC interconnected system. They also have the possibility to procure this over the interconnector through buying it from other member states. Bilateral energy markets have been going on since the beginning, where members can enter into parallel contracts in between them, and then we can allow the members to trade this power through the interconnector and give them valid trade notification. Lately, we have introduced a spot market. Basically, the day-ahead market was the first one that we started with through an online platform. We call it the GEMS platform. And that will allow for introducing more and more markets. We started with the day-ahead market, and we target to have an intraday market. We also are introducing an exchange-based bilateral energy markets on the same platform. And in addition to that, of course, our interconnector control center manages the balancing market to have all the balances in the system. Looking ahead, I think our vision is becoming a global hub and grid interconnections. And I think it's key for us to create a dynamic electricity market in the GCC region. And to do that, we're working on our internal process, but also we're targeting to expand beyond the region to interconnect neighboring countries, and that will allow us to start coupling the markets within the Arab region and beyond, going to Asia, Africa, and Europe. And that is one of the main objectives of the GCC in the next 5 years. I hope I've given you a little bit of a taste of the experiences that we have. And as I said, the time is short, so I try to give you a little bit of taste, and I'll be open for your questions and feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Ahmed. I think you did an excellent job in sort of laying the framework in terms of your journey thus far. And we have about 20 minutes, so we should be able to get quite a few questions I got. I want to start perhaps with the one that intrigues a lot of people. And you use the word political will as part of the goal for setting this up, which brings trust as a very important component for having that political will to survive. Based on your experience, what drove the political will? Was it because of shared vision, shared value? What was it that drove the political will of those 6 countries to come together and make this a reality?
Yeah, I think the process took about 20 years. It's not something easy to go. I think there was a realization of the importance of this.
Okay.
And I think you recall that in the early 2000s there was a few blackouts that happened around the world, and we had our share of these kind of blackouts, and that really was a driver for knowing the importance of such a grid that will allow for support during emergencies. Also, I think it's the kind of networking and discussions that we had within our group, because there was a committee for interconnection that started very early on, and there were continuous discussions about issues. But as long as there is shared vision, and I think there was shared vision, there was a very keen discussion about issues. There are lots of issues that needs to be addressed. All the parties were willing to do a little bit of compromises. So we in discussing the agreements, it took us about 2 years for the discussion, and we went through lots of workshops, joint workshops with like maybe 25 to 30 representatives from all the member states, with different backgrounds, whether it's legal, whether it's technical, whether it's financial, just to address these kind of issues between 6 different countries. But this kind of willingness to find a solution allow us to always find a middle point where everybody will agree on. So I think it's a matter of discussing with the will to agree, and there will always be some kind of a middle point or a solution that will satisfy all requirements.
Well, that's interesting. So it brings me to the point of the issue around getting to that harmonization to be able to get that political will. We know many other countries, regions, specifically the EU have the European market. They have a mechanism when it comes to dealing with dispute resolutions, for example, right? You have in the US, we have FERC. In the case of GCCIA, how do you deal with rules enforcement, or when one entity doesn't follow the rules? How are the rules enforced within the GCCIA construct, given that there is no FERC, there is no EU ACER, for example, or in Australia, there's no federation per se to make this happen. So how does it work in the case of GCCIA?
As I said, I think we had an elaborate legal framework. We had the general agreement, and we had the power exchange and trading agreement. And within these two, there are different tools that we can use at different levels to ensure that everybody will follow the rules and will ensure that they meet their obligations. So we don't allow, for instance, for a free rider, somebody who will say, "Oh, I will not carry my obligation; somebody else will do it." There is an elaborate system of tariffs and charges and penalties that everybody has agreed on. This can be applied by the GCC Interconnection Authority with approval of the regulator that we have, which is the ARC, and any of the participating members that does not meet their obligation in all the different technical aspects. For instance, there are certain penalties that we set, and these penalties range between certain financial penalties. It goes all the way to a state of default, that will really ensure that everybody abides by the rules, and because nobody wants to be out of this interconnector, so everybody has been abiding. Our experience since the beginning until now, everybody has been actually very abiding by the rules and following the rules and meeting their obligations. The key thing is that also we have these two committees, the operations committee and the planning committees, and they do their required roles in the operation domain and in the planning domain to ensure that the member states are following their obligations, and they do that before they get to a level where there's any kind of default or there's any kind of discrepancy. And this is ongoing. These kind of meetings are going on all the time, very periodically. They're following the kind of obligation that each member state has. They have review reports from time to time to see where they are. If there are any kind of issues, there is always this kind of joint meetings to discuss and find solutions. They issue recommendations that we send to the member states and send to the CEOs to abide with. So it's a continuous and elaborate coordination and collaboration work, with everybody being very professional and willing to abide with this. So it's the whole thing that works together, the operation committee, the planning committee, the regulatory committee, applying the concepts of the general agreement and applying the concepts of the power exchange and trading agreement that allows us to have this kind of reliable operation.
So I would like to eventually get into some technical questions, more on the operational side, which is where I'm sure you and I will have fun. So we've talked about trust in terms of the journey. We talked about political will in terms of the journey. We talked about the regulatory framework to make this whole construct work. I want to talk briefly about value in terms of cost-benefit analysis. Because one of the things you said, which I found was fascinating, was that the equity is calculated based on the benefits that accrues to different stakeholders, if you may. How is that calculated? I mean, how do you define that benefit? What is it based on? What are the metrics that defines that benefit to say I pay X and you pay Y?
Yeah, I think it's we are using a very common metric, which is the loss of load expectation.
Okay.
And we are trying to achieve a target loss of load expectations, which when you are connected together through the interconnector, you can achieve it with lower requirement of capacity, overall capacity, because that allows you to share the capacity and that allows you to share the operating reserves. So through this kind of sharing, because of the interconnector, it allows each member state to invest a little less in order to meet the same reliability target. So these kind of savings, that's what we calculated. How much you need to invest in terms of generation capacity for the next 20 years without the interconnector, and how much you will need to invest with the interconnector. And the difference between that is the saving that each member states will have. And based on the 20 years span, we have calculated each member state how much it will be saving. And there was an agreement that they will contribute in the same pro rata, as per the savings.
So is that metric dynamic in the sense that obviously 10 years ago, the world has changed. You have a lot of renewables coming online. You have the whole systems changed. So your contribution, may have sort of, or your value that you've accruing from the system may have gone up as opposed to going down, or vice versa. So is it a dynamic metric that changes maybe every 5 years or maybe every 2 years? Or what's the periodicity of the renewal of that metric?
Yes, it is a dynamic one,
Okay.
and it changes all the time, actually. And if we do it every year, it will be different results, a little bit different results. So that's why in the general agreement, there has been a provision that each 5 years, we conduct a study and show it to the member states about the different shares of benefits, and the member states will decide whether they need to revise their shares or keep it as it is. We did it the first time, the first 5 years, and the member states saw that and say, well, let's continue with the same shareholding, although there was some significant changes. I think now we are a little bit changing this kind of practice, because we are reviewing and developing a new financial model for the GCC interconnector, which will be based on a beneficiary pays method, which is now the annual charges for utilizing of the interconnector are being based on the historical benefits, which are proportional to the shareholding. So each member state pays in terms of shareholding. But now, because of this dynamic nature of the benefits, now we are revising the financial model that we will be having, new model that will calculate this kind of dynamic changes of benefits, and accordingly, the member states will pay annual fees based on the actual benefits that they get, not on a studied one. So that's what we're working on, and I think this will give more fair allocation of costs to the member states than before.
So we've gotten quite a few questions on the issue of pricing, no surprise, and I see some of the people asking these questions, and I know where they're coming from in terms of why they're asking the question from their background. So let me just wrap it up into two sort of pricing related questions. So the first one has to do with the introduction of regional pricing for electricity across. How is that working, and will cross-border transmission tariffs in the context of pricing, will that disappear in the future as you create more liquid markets, if you may, for power trading? So that's the first one. And then the second one, which is related to that, has to do with the scope of GCCIA geographically. You cover a very large geographical area, not as big as PJM, but relatively big enough. And so how do you deal with the settling of pricing at the different nodes in terms of the differentiation between, say, the north of the hub and the southern part of the hub? If there's a huge delta in terms of those prices, how are those harmonized? Because you do not have locational marginal price currently in the GCI, right?
Yes.
You do not have that. Okay. So how do you deal with that? So first, the issue of pricing, locational, transmission pricing, does it go away with regards to long-term market design? And then secondly, settling of the different price differentials at the different nodes across the interconnector.
As we started, I think we've used a very simple model where we had a capacity charge for all the interconnector to be equal. One reason for that is that the volume of trading on the interconnector was very low, and still very low. We are still not not beyond 10% of utilization of the capacity, and that's why we are now doing some kind of incentive programs to even waive this fee. I think in the future, as the volume of trading will move up, we have to come up with specific methodologies. One of the methodologies that we have not decided what to do with the distributional prices or anything like that, but I think we will have to do that once the volume of trading is becoming some significant level. And that's why now we are just giving some kind of a promotional tariffs just to push things up, and hopefully in the future we will be revising this to a more elaborate system. What was the first question?
The first question had to do with the issue of cross-border transmission tariffs. Will they be abolished in the future as it relates to pricing the pricing mechanism? How is that going to change as the markets evolve?
Yeah, and in terms of cross-border, now the model that we have is that we have this kind of uniform transmission charges that go all the way to each of the member states. In terms of cross-border, we are practically crossing the border immediately without any kind of obstacle.
Mhm.
But the thing is that the energy pricing that's within each of the member states is different, and it has a different methodology to be calculated. It's a different component of subsidy in it, and this becomes part of the obstacles that does not give proper visibility about what is the real cost of electricity and what is the appropriate level of energy pricing for me as a member state to participate in. And through this pilot project, as I said, we're trying to make the member states aware of the kind of pricing that they need to follow in order to be part of the market and be an efficient participant in the market. And I think this will give this kind of visibility and will allow for more volume and will allow for this kind of more cross-border trading.
So we got. I would like to end with two more questions, Ahmed, and we will be remiss if we didn't ask these questions because it comes to the core of what GCCIA's vision is all about. The first one has to do with renewable integration. A lot of talk about how markets facilitate renewable integration, but we know with renewables, there's this issue of flexibility. So can you talk a little bit about the issue of integrating renewables? What are some of your plans? How do you deal with the issue of flexibility when it comes to the fluctuation of renewables? So that's question one. And if you take that in a few minutes, and I'll give you the last question, which I think you will find very fascinating.
Okay. Now, as you know, renewables, integration of renewable is always an issue, especially if it comes with big volumes like what we are having in the Gulf. Now, we see lots of projects coming up, and soon enough, we'll have some significant volumes of renewables in our system. We're trying to learn from other regions on how they have handled that. We've discussed with, for instance, California, and we saw how the duck curve that they're having and how the renewables are really affecting the conventional utilization of generation, and how this kind of ramp up that needs to be availed, and whenever you really drop the solar power, for instance. And these are the kind of things that we need to develop. But all in all, I think we need stronger interconnectors, because the larger volumes that we will have will make it necessary for us to have larger interconnectors. We're now considering expansion of the current capacities, but also we're learning about ways and mechanisms and processes on how to deal with the integration of renewables in systems. And we have to do this fast. We are having two different studies being done, one with IPRI and one with EGI at different domains. One is in the operation domain and one in the planning domain, to ensure that the operation and the planning of renewables is harmonized so that we can integrate it safely and we can utilize the market to do this kind of exchange of renewables. So we are still in the process of figuring out the systems and the processes and the practices that we need to do. But hopefully within a year or two we'll be there and we'll be applying these kind of approaches.
So my last question goes to the bigger, broader GCCIA vision. And you talk about becoming a global hub. You showed a map that showed different regions around the world. For example, we know that in Africa, in West Africa, for example, they've struggled for many years to the creation of an electricity market in the West African power pool. There are a couple of people in the audience who are from parts of West Africa on this call. I know you've had other discussions with taking your expertise elsewhere around the world. So as you move into other markets and you talk about this regional hub creation and sharing your lessons around the world, do you see GCCIA getting more involved in terms of offering technical assistance based on your experience, or maybe taking ownership stake where you would have GCCIA going into other parts of the world and perhaps investing in the creation of electricity markets? What's your play? How are you going to be this global giant from the Gulf and going around the world and creating these markets?
We don't plan to be a global giant, but I think we need to be a global hub to facilitate this kind of process. We believe that eventually all the grids in the world will be connected together. I think there are lots of benefits to all the grids to be there. And I think, frankly, that we don't have any choice, because we need to have more utilization of capacities. We have to more resilience. And it's our belief that you can achieve that by strong interconnectors and by this kind of coupling of markets that allow for utilizing of the capacities in a more optimal way. But the GCCIA is not a normal transmission system operator like what the national operator is. We are a regional interconnector, and we deal with this kind of issues that comes up with the international interconnector. And we have gone through this, and we have gone through how you deal with it, how you have to do lots of political work between the member states, diplomatic work. We have to be very diplomatic when we deal with issues, because we know that each country has its own conditions, and we have to be very aware and very sensitive to these conditions and try to address their needs. This takes a lot of work, working together with the member states. We have gone through this, for the last 10 or so years with the member states, and I think we have achieved a good understanding of this. But I think the future is towards collaboration. We need to collaborate with other countries. We need to collaborate with our other organizations, also not necessarily the organizations that relate to transmission, but also organizations that do with energy policies, about and energy per se, not only electricity, because now energy is becoming the overall thing, and electricity is becoming in the center of it. So I think the international collaboration is very important in our era. I think we need to discuss more, we sit together more, we try to help each other to achieve our mutual goals. And I think this is where the GCCIA is becoming like an open forum to promote this kind of discussion, to try to reach out to organizations such as EEI. We are also members in Go15, we are members of EPICS, we are members in many organizations, because we want to have a harmonized vision with others that will allow us to do our part in the region, but also help each other to achieve our goals. And that's why we are having these kind of discussions with many countries. We are discussing now the interconnection of Iraq. We are having studies to interconnect Jordan and Egypt. We're also coordinating within our own GCC member states to achieve the visions of the GCC member states, like Saudi Arabia, like Emirates, like Bahrain, all of them. So it is really a very interesting era that we're in. But I think we need to collaborate, we need to discuss, we need to learn from each other, we need to support each other to reach these common goals.
So excellent. So I think to wrap it up, a couple of key words have come out of this conversation with you: trust, political will, certainly collaboration, a big theme. Then just one last quick 30-second question is, knowing you, this is a more personal question, but professionally personal, if I may say that. You're an engineer, and would you say your job now has gone from being trained as an engineer to now becoming a diplomat? Because you just said all of the foundation for success with GCCIA, one of the important things is being able to be or conduct yourself as a diplomat. I'm a big fan of Benjamin Franklin, who was obviously the father of electricity, also the first US diplomat. So would you see yourself now as a diplomat, or as still an engineer at core? What do you see yourself as, diplomat or engineer, or both?
Well, of course, you need engineers to do things. We have brilliant engineers in our organization and all other organizations, but I think our job has gone beyond that. I think we need to be more than engineers. We need to be economists. We need to be diplomats. We need to be a little bit more. We need to be legal. So to handle the issues, it's not only technical, it's really a combination of all these together. And we have to comprehend it and put it all together and be open-minded to find solutions that not only address the technical part, but the technical, the legal, the financial, and the regulatory part, and put it all together into something that will work for everybody.
Well, I really believe that the journey you've been on is one that a lot of other regions can learn from. Specifically, again, I bring up because of a lot of people that call from West Africa. I bring up the West African power pool, the East African power pool, the creation of markets, even in other parts of the world, have a lot of lessons to learn from the GCCIA experience. So Ahmed, I think thank you so much for this this presentation. Once again, I'm pleased that we have renewed our strategic partnership with GCCIA, we meaning EEI. And so I look forward to the next 2 years of really seeing how we can together collaborate on an international stage to push the idea of electricity markets being created as one of the linchpin for achieving a global energy transition. So I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for the time, and I hope you stay safe. And hopefully we'll get past the COVID pandemic and we'll be able to meet face-to-face in person. So thank you so much, Ahmed. Thank you again, ladies and gentlemen. I will now turn it over to Vanessa, who will give us some closing guidance on how you'll be able to get the presentation. Vanessa, over to you.
Thank you, Lawrence, and thank you, Ahmed. Thank you to everyone for joining today's webinar. We hope you found the discussion valuable, and we appreciated all of your thoughtful questions and participation throughout the session. We will send out the webinar presentation and recording to all attendees, and we look forward to your attendance at our future webinars and virtual events. To continue engaging with EEI International programs and to learn about other upcoming events, please follow us on Twitter or visit our website. I've posted both in the chat. And thank you again, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you so much, Ahmed. Goodbye.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye. Bye-bye.